This is Dads Watching Sports. It's the show by dads who watch sports, for dads who watch sports, or just dads in general. Here are the dads with a plan for every hashtag dad life and sports fan, Kyle Castles and Michael Draper.
Welcome into Dad's Watching Sports. He is Kyle Castles, and I am Michael Draper, and thank you for joining us for another episode. Kyle, it is episode 93 of Dad's Watching Sports. It's hard to believe, almost 2 full years ago, we started this thing. If you remember Super Bowl Sunday of 2020, we started this show, and we are back, and we are getting close to 100 episodes, Kyle. 100 episodes. Can you believe it?
No, 100 is insane. I'll be honest. I didn't think we would be doing this long, but man, here we are. 93 episodes in as of tonight.
That's right. And I'm really excited. So Kyle, we are recording this show. Normally we live stream our shows, and we do those on Sundays, and we talk about, kind of the relevant stuff going on in sports, but we've got a great guest. And so we're kind of doubling up, and we're recording this show, and this show is actually going out on Super Bowl Sunday of 2022. So 2 years in terms of 2 years kind of to the day of Super Bowl Sunday. Here we are. It's episode 93, and this is the show that we'll be launching. So those of you that are checking this out for the podcast, I hope you've enjoyed the past couple episodes, but we are enjoying our time with this podcast and being back with you. And Kyle, I'm really excited about our guest this week on the show, Damon West. He is a guy that just has an incredibly inspirational story, and I look forward to sharing it all with you listeners out there. So we're going to bring Damon on now. Damon, welcome to Dad's Watching Sports. How are you doing?
Kyle, Michael, man, thanks a lot for having me on. I'm doing great, man. The fact that y'all adjusted your schedules to my schedule, it made it a lot easier, man. We're getting to shoot on the weekend, and after kids are all to bed and everything, man. So this is fantastic.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you joining the show and joining us, and we're going to talk a lot about dad life or stepdad life and all about you. But I've got to go through your kind of brag sheet here. We try to do this a little bit at the beginning of the show when we have guests, is just talk a little bit about them. So if you'll bear with me, but Damon, Kyle, just listen to the accolades here.
First off, is this another guest that's going to make me feel inadequate?
Well, so Damon, here's the thing. So every week on our show, Kyle says, I know a lot about football because I played college football. So we may have to do a competition here about who knows more about football, because Damon also played college football, a starting quarterback at North Texas, Division I football player, Kyle. Also a criminal justice professor, best-selling author of 2 books, The Change Agent and The Coffee Bean. Kind of widely known as a keynote speaker across some big time industries, Walmart, AIG, and Kyle, Mr. West has spoken to the Crimson Tide as a keynote speaker or a guest, the Longhorns, Clemson, and even our recently crowned national championship Georgia Bulldog team. He's the co-founder of BA Coffee Bean Foundation, been featured on countless media outlets, including now Dad's Watching Sports, and is an inspiration to so many. And I would have to say right off the bat, an awesome Twitter follow with a lot of daily inspirational sayings, quotes, etc. So Damon, we are beyond excited to have you join us.
Well, man, I appreciate it. And look, Kyle, man, I'll just go ahead and bow out now. You know more about sports than I do. When I was in prison, man, it was one of those things where if a guy came up and asked you the answer to a question, the safe answer is like, man, I just don't know the answer to that, or you know more than I do about that. That'll get you out of a lot of conversations. But no, I mean, I'm not placating you at all. I really think you probably do know more about me, about sports than I do. I just have been fortunate to go into a lot of really cool organizations and share this message and teams and get into their cultures and hang out with these programs that, I mean, they're just storied institutions. But I've been very grateful to be a part of sports all my life. Sports played a big part of my life.
Absolutely. So you mentioned this to me when we were corresponding via email, and then you mentioned when we jumped on here. So your wife's on a girls' beach trip. So what have you been doing to keep yourself entertained while she's out of town for a couple of days?
Well, I've caught up on a lot of sports. I mean, but honestly, I've been doing a lot of writing. I've got a book that's coming out May, June. It's called The Locker Room.
Okay.
And it's about a team It has to deal with one of their players makes a racially insensitive joke at a party on a Friday night after a football game, and their locker room is broken. And we know this from sports, that teams that win championships, teams that win games, they have a healthy locker room. And a healthy locker room, it's a place where your success is my success. The standard is the standard, and a mistake doesn't make you a mistake. There can always be a path to become whole in a healthy locker room. So in this book, we explore how great teams can overcome any adversity, and we take on the difficult topics of racism and the cancel culture. Because when my co-author, Stephen Mackey, came to me and said, hey, will you write a book with me about racism? Because he's a big guy that deals with a lot of sports and does sports curriculums. I was like, Stephen, no, I wouldn't do a book just about racism, but I would do a book about racism and the cancel culture. Because if you're going to talk about one, I think you need to talk about the other. How do we eliminate both of them? So, I mean, it's not like it's ambitious to sit down and write a book about racism and the cancel culture, right, in the year 2022. Right. But we did it. We threaded the needle. And I'm going to tell you, this book, it's coming out. I'm doing a lot of the stuff for the book jacket right now. But what I did whenever Stephen and I finished writing this book, it's a coaching fable. It takes about an hour to read. And I think it'll be in every sports team and high school, college, maybe pro. It'll be in offices in corporate America all over the place. But what we did when we finished the book is I took it and I gave this book out to 5 high school football coaches that I know in America that are hardcore Trump guys. These are the guys that wear their MAGA hats and they wear it on their sleeve, right? So and then I took the book to 5 guys that I knew that are high school football coaches in America. They're big-time BLM type guys. They wear it on their sleeve too. And I gave it to all 10 of these guys, and I said, guys, listen, read this book right now where you are in America. Read this book and come back and tell me what you think, the raw truth of it. Mm-hmm. Man, all 10 guys came back with the same thing, y'all. When is this book coming out? I need this book for my program right now. Man, we threaded the needle, right? I mean, how do you write a book about racism and the cancel culture and get both of those sides to say, this is a great book, we got to have it? So yeah. I'm excited about the book. It's coming out in about 5 months.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Kyle and I also both coached. Kyle coached high school, a little bit of college and high school football. I coached high school basketball as well. And so I know from both of us, just from our perspectives of being coaches, like you said, there are things that can divide a locker room. And then it's hard to have a winning team when you have a divided locker room, even if it's just a few people that are not in line with everybody else. So count me in as somebody who would love to read that, and we'll be looking out for that for sure. You've already kind of got into a little bit about your career, but just tell our listeners out there, and I'm sure a lot of them are familiar with you, but just tell us a little bit about maybe the Cliff Notes version of just your backstory and how you went from quarterback in North Texas until where you are today and kind of the in-between.
Yeah, a good starting point for this isn't really the beginning. It's kind of like, right in the middle somewhere, not even in the middle somewhere. 14 years ago, 2008, July 30th, 2008 to be exact, I was sitting around this little rundown apartment in Dallas, Texas, and I had this meth dealer of mine sitting next to me. And I was a full-blown meth addict back in 2008 at the head of an organized crime ring in Dallas. And I'm sitting there telling his name is Tex, my drug dealer, and I'm telling Tex, the end is near. The cops are on to me. A few days before this guy that I was doing these burglaries with in Dallas, this guy named Dustin, had been picked up by the Dallas Police Department in a stolen car. And so I know it's just a matter of time before they close in on me. And man, the window shattered on my right. The flashbang grenade was bouncing across my floor, blows up in my face. And when I came to, when I can see and hear again, there was a cop standing over me in full SWAT riot gear, boot on my chest, barrel of an assault rifle, digging in my eye socket. And he's screaming at the top of his lungs, don't move, don't move. And man, I look up and I'm like, man, don't worry. And then one of the cops came in and screamed, we got him. We got the Uptown Burglar. Now, that moniker is a name that I'll live with for the rest of my life, the Uptown Burglar. That's the consequences of my decisions. About a dozen other meth addicts and myself, young and old, male and female, black and white, and everything in between, we indiscriminately and without reservation broke into the homes of dozens of people in the uptown neighborhood of Dallas to feed our insatiable meth habits. But on July 30th, 2008, the Uptown Burglars came to an end because, they had their man. They had the mastermind of the whole thing. And almost a year later, a jury in Dallas County sentenced me to life in prison, 65 years for organized crime, engaging in organized criminal activity. It's my my first felony conviction ever, and the jury maxed me out. And it was on this little trip between jail and prison. I've got a few months there. My parents had a conversation with me, and my mom was talking to me about how I was raised. And guys, listen, man, I came from a great home. I grew up in a little town called Port Arthur, Texas. And Port Arthur is down where Louisiana and Texas meet on the Gulf Coast. A blue-collar town, refinery town, predominantly black town. Grew up being one of the only white kids at slumber parties, birthday parties, sports, you name it. My father, Bob West, was a sports writer down here. He was a sports writer for 50 years. So I was around sports all my life. But he was probably one of the most notable things he did was he was the first sports writer in this part of Texas to break the color barrier. He's the first guy to put a black athlete on the front page of a sports page in the year 1971. And so I had tremendous influence from my parents, great influence. My mother was a nurse. Got into substance abuse at a young age, but y'all, man, I could throw a football. God bless me with a cannon for a right arm. And I'm sure y'all have heard a thing or two about Texas high school football. It is like a religion in this state, man. You talk about, what do you do on a Friday night in the fall, man? It's the last person to leave, turn the lights out because we're going to watch football. And I was the man. I was a 3-year starting quarterback for a 5A school. Got a scholarship to play ball at the University of North Texas, like you talked about. And by the time I was 20, I was a starting quarterback for that D1 team. But I got hurt against Texas A&M in 1996. 3 games into my redshirt sophomore season, never played football again. And that's when I got into more substance abuse. Graduated college from there, went on to work in Congress in Washington, worked on Wall Street, worked for a guy running for president. And it was when I was working as a Wall Street broker in 2004 in Dallas that I was introduced to meth for the first time. And it took me no time from that introduction to meth to lose everything and be living on the streets. And of course, 4 years later, after the first hit of that pipe, I was arrested by a SWAT team. So my mother is going over my life with me and how I was raised. And she said, that I owed a debt to not only Texas for the things I did, that I owe the debt to society for my crimes, but I owed a debt to my mother and my father too, because they gave me all the opportunity, love, and support to be anything I wanted to be in life. And my mother said, here's the debt. She cashed it in. She said, when you go to prison, you're not going to get in one of these white hate groups, one of these Aryan Brotherhood type of gangs, and you're not going to get any tattoos while you're in there. And I mean, look, I came out of prison almost 10 years with no tattoos. These guys want to tattoo every inch of your body and the joint. But my mom gives me this ultimatum. She says, no gangs, no tattoos. You come back as the man we raised or don't come back at all. This is May 18, 2009. I remember the day. And so I'm going around Dallas County Jail, waiting for the prison bus to come pick me up to serve this life sentence. And I'm scared to death, y'all. And I'm asking all these guys that are in there, man, how am I going to survive? What am I going to do? And every guy I talk to, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, man, they tell me the same thing, that you have to get to a gang. You won't survive without a gang. The gang is going to be your family now. The gang will love you. The gang will protect you. They said, make your life easy, Wes, get into a gang. But there was this older black man that I met in prison, in Dallas County Jail. This guy, I call him Mr. Jackson. And Mr. Jackson, he's what you call a career criminal. This guy's been in and out of prison all of his like 4 or 5 times. But he's the most positive guy I've ever met in my life, y'all. This guy had a smile on his face everywhere he went, man. You couldn't knock the smile off of Jackson's face, man. And every day, every single morning, this man would come up to my cell, to my bunk, and he would pick me up like a ray of sunshine in that dark place. And so one morning, Jackson comes up. He got a cup of coffee in his hands and a smile on his face. And he's like, West, he said, I've been watching how you're dealing with these knuckleheads and these dummies talking about you got to get into a gang. He said, man, don't listen to these fools. He said, but let me tell you what prison's going to be like. And he's telling me about the racial element of prison, that race is everything in prison. All the inmates in there make it about race, and that I'll fight the white gangs first, and I have to fight the black gangs if I want my independence. So he tells me this story. He says, I want you to imagine prison as a pot of boiling water. He said, anything we put in this pot of boiling water is going to be changed by the heat and the pressure inside that pot. So he said, I want to put 3 things in this pot of boiling water and watch how they change. A carrot, an egg, and a coffee bean. So here's where I first heard the story of the coffee bean. So he walked me through it. He said, if I put a carrot in the pot of boiling water we call prison, the carrot's going to turn soft, mushy, and weak. He said the carrot got beat, he got robbed, may have gotten raped, may have gotten killed. You don't want to be the carrot. He said, if I put an egg in the pot of boiling water we call prison, the egg the inside of the egg, that soft liquid inside, will become hard. Your heart becomes hardened when you're the egg. And he said, if your heart becomes hardened, you're incapable of giving or receiving love. And he said, if you're incapable of giving or receiving love, then you've become institutionalized and you won't come back as someone your parents recognize, because your eggshell will have swastikas tattooed all over it. But then he asked me, he said, West, tell me what happens to the coffee bean. Kyle, Mike, I didn't know what happened to a coffee bean in a pot of boiling water, right?
Yeah.
So this guy shares with me one of the most important and transformational messages I've ever heard in my life. And what's interesting about this is that this guy, man, this is a guy that doesn't look like me, didn't come from the same America I came from, doesn't believe the same things I believe, y'all. This is a black Muslim man from the streets of Dallas, Texas, y'all. I'm a white Catholic guy from this little town called Port Arthur, but this guy, so different than me, shares with me one of the most important and transformational messages ever. And I tell people all the time, man, that's really one of the keys to the whole story, is that, you know, I was receptive to this messenger, you know, because in life, if you ever shut yourself off to people because they look different than you, different race, gender, ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, if we shut ourselves off to people because of their differences, then we're missing some of the most important lessons and some of the best friendships in this life. Because this old black man from the streets of Dallas shared with me one of the most important messages, y'all. And I tell people all the time that in my life, God has never just reached down his hand and put it on my head and say, hey, Damon, you're healed. Go on, sin no more. No, in my life, what God's done is put people in my life. When I was younger, these people came in the form of coaches. They were teachers. They were people in my community of Port Arthur that helped raise me, because it takes a village, right? And then I grew up, and then other people would come into my life. But this man in Dallas County Jail was one of those people that I feel like God put on my path. Because he told me that day, he said, if I put a coffee bean into that same pot of boiling water we call prison, he said, now you have to change the name of the water to coffee. He said the coffee bean was the only thing that could change the water. Everything else was changed by the water. He said, but the coffee bean changed the water, because the power, he said, was inside the coffee bean. And he said, it's just like it's inside of you. You have the power. You are a coffee bean. And so he tells me, if you want to survive prison and come back out as your parents recognize, you have to change the prison around you. You have to be the coffee bean in that pot of boiling water. And the last thing he tells me before I go to prison, the prison bus comes to pick me up. And the last thing Mr. Jackson says to me is, go out there and go be a coffee bean. Be a coffee bean, man. 4 words. And this is a powerful sentence from this man. These 4 words mean that no matter what the situation is, no matter what the variable in front of me, no matter what the adversity is in front of me, I won't just survive. I'll thrive if the power is inside me. And that's the message I take to all these groups, these teams, these organizations all over America. It's about being that coffee bean, because we have that power inside of us to transform the world around us. And the power doesn't come from the outside unless we give the outside the power. Because prison was the hardest pot of boiling water I've ever been in my life, y'all. This is the most toxic, it's the most dangerous thing I've ever done in my life. And I don't suggest it to anybody, man. It was hard. It took, 2 months of fighting constantly inside that place. Just like Jackson said, it was first 2 weeks was the white gangs. After that was the black gangs. I went out to the rec yard about 6 weeks into prison. Everything is segregated by race in the rec yard. But man, I went out there as a white boy. I got in the basketball game, the only white guy on the court, man. And I'm taking it from every direction. Man, I'm getting pounded by these guys in the basketball court. But I earned the respect. It took about a week of playing basketball, and the most brutal basketball in the world, but I earned the respect. And then I got a chance to work on myself and become that coffee bean. And that's really the power of the message, man. I come out and I tell people about my backstory, tell them about the coffee bean. But more important, I tell them how I became that coffee bean in that pot of boiling water called prison. And man, I walked out of prison after 7 years and 3 months. I got out November 16th, 2015. The parole board came to see me, and they're like, look, man, here's the deal. We know what you've been doing. We know that you didn't just change yourself. You changed one of the toughest prisons in Texas. Can you do that out in the free world? Can you find those coffee beans? And so that's the mission I'm on. I'm on parole to the year 2073. So I got a little time left to explore how to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that's such a cool story. And like you said, just, you never know, the individuals that God places in your life and that you come into interaction with. And for you, it was in jail, and that changed your life. And that's, I appreciate you sharing that with us, sharing it with the world, because it's absolutely true. And it's a great thing to continue to hear.
Man, I got goosebumps. just hearing your story. That was,
I know, right?
That was fantastic. And you mentioned talking to teams, you mentioned talking to organizations, but if I understand it right, you also talk to those that are still incarcerated. And you just want to talk about the importance of talking to those, I'm assuming men and women that you talk to, just the importance of that to you and your story.
Yeah, Kyle, good question, because look, I tell people all the time, look, I mean, you look at my resume that I'm building of all the places I go, the companies I get to go to, the teams I get to go to. I get to meet the Nick Sabans, the Dabo Sweeney. I get to spend time in their culture, Kirby Smart. But the thing I enjoy the most, the place where I think I have the most currency to spend in this world, is back inside of prisons. When I go back into an institution, a men's or a women's prison somewhere in America or a jail, I've got a captive audience. I've got 100% of that audience is listening to everything I say. I mean, there's not a person in the room that's not paying attention. And not that I have a deficit of people paying attention when I walk into a room. Obviously, Kyle, you heard the story, gave you goosebumps. It's like, man, this is electric. But when I go into a prison, they're a captive audience. They want what I've got. Mm-hmm. And I'm in there to tell them how you do this. I'm here to lay the blueprint out for how they can transform their world. And I tell them the reason why it's so important, you hit on something very big, Kyle. It's so important to go into those institutions like that for me. And it's not something that pays a dime in money, but it pays in a different way for me, because now I'm putting this forward and I'm giving them this important lesson that the man or woman that they want to become when they get out of prison one day has to begin while they're in there. I mean, from day one, when you walk into a prison, the thought of reentry, how do I want to re-enter the world, has to be on your mind if you want to be successful at it. Because here's some of the raw facts. When I got out of prison, I went back to school and I got my master's in criminal justice. And today I'm a professor at the University of Houston downtown. I teach a class called Prisons in America. I teach a class about reentry. And here's a glaring statistic to throw at you. 95% of the people that are incarcerated in America are going to get out of prison one day. 95% of 3.8 million people are going to walk out of prison one day. And my thing is this: we want that 95% to have the best tools and best resources under their belt while they're in there to have the best life possible, because they're going to be next to your family at Walmart one day. They're going to be next to you pumping gas daily around society. They're everywhere around you. We want these people to have a better opportunity, a better life. Now, there's so much you can do, because, as they say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink it. And the person that's incarcerated has to want to pick up and change their life in the middle of that process. But it's very important, Kyle. And one of the big things I talk about when I go into an institution is about a program of recovery. I learned when I was in prison about these variables that can kind of determine whether or not someone has a chance to have a negative interaction with the criminal justice system. Variables like poverty, lack of education, race, lack of a family unit. One of the things I saw more of in prison than anything was people didn't come from complete families. And I was an outlier on those four things. I'm a white, middle class, educated guy in America. My parents are still married to this day. Been married for 54 years, But the one variable that I did hit on, I was not an outlier on, was substance abuse. 80% of the people that are incarcerated have substance abuse issues. And that's it. I mean, most of the people locked up are addicts. That's why it's so important for people to find a program recovery and you work that program recovery for the rest of their life. Because if you're an addict like me, I'm an addict, I'm powerless over drugs and alcohol. But because I have a program recovery, I'm in a 12-step program called AA. I don't represent or speak for AA, but AA is a program recovery that I'm in. I'll be in AA the rest of my life.
Wow. Well, as someone who has, I've also kind of directly seen I guess you could say the mission of individuals, speaking to or visiting with those that are incarcerated. My dad was a minister growing up, and he, when at one of the stops that he had, he was really, one of the biggest areas that he really focused on was the jail ministry and going in and kind of doing what you said, like you mentioned, these are individuals that are going to be back out one day and hopefully contributing to society. And so we need to equip them with, yes, some tools and some resources. But from his standpoint, it was, I needed a person with a love of Christ and get hopefully allow them to get their lives back on track. And so again, like it's it's just amazing to hear that that's, as you said, like, hey, I've spoken to these sports teams and met these big figures, but that is where what I interpreted is this is where my niche is. This is the place where I feel like I'm most impactful. And I think that's fantastic. So kudos for you to kind of going back and paying it forward, so to speak, in that regard.
Well, absolutely. And it doesn't, that's all. And that's true. It is the place where I have the most, where I feel like I have the most impact, and I'm probably the most needed. But hey, man, look, I'd be lying if I told you there wasn't something in it for me. Every time I get to go back into that toxic pot of boiling water and dip my toe in there for a couple hours, smells of prison, the sights, the sounds, once your senses start getting assaulted with the fact that you're back inside of the institution of prison, you know what it feels so good to do? Leave.
Walk out.
It feels so good to walk out of those places and walk out that front gate. And it's just, hey, walking out and saying, hey, God, thank you, man. Thank you for this life I have. And when I see people in there, man, it's, when I see people in the streets, I see people living under overpasses and stuff like that. There, but for the grace of God, go I, man. And I walk out.
For sure. Well, this is Dad's Watching Sports, and we talk a lot about dad life, and we conversed before we started the recording here. We talked a little bit about your family life and the dynamics that you've got there. So when you and I first connected about the show, you said, hey, I just want to make sure that I can come on and talk about being a stepdad. So talk to us about kind of how that role has developed for you and what's life like as a stepdad.
Yeah, and I appreciate y'all doing that, because I think it's important. There's a lot of stepdads out there. There's a lot of blended families. And my role as a stepfather, when I met Kendall, my wife, we got married on May 18th, 2019. And it's, some people have a hard time remembering their anniversary, but I'll never forget mine, because May 18th, 2009, as we talked about from the story already, was the day that I was sentenced to life in prison. So May 18th, 2019, 10 years to the day, was the day that I got married. Or as my wife says, I went from one life sentence to another, right? So
well played. Well
played, Kendall, well played. So, but before I got married to Kendall, and before I even got to meet her daughter, Clara, when we were dating, she sat me down and she said, Damon, listen, she said, Clara has an amazing father. She said, Clara's dad and her have a wonderful relationship. It didn't work out between Kendall and Clara's dad, but she said he's an amazing dad, and he's such a big part of her life, and they have this incredible bond. She said, so you don't need to try to be Clara's father. You need to, if you will focus, she said, on being Clara's friend, be a role model, and make Clara a priority when she's around. She said, then I think you and Clara will have a great relationship. And so that's what I did. Those were kind of my instructions. She also told me this. She said, look, because Clara's father is such an active part of her life, he and I will raise Clara as her parents. She said, you need to understand your role. You're not a parent. You're a step parent. And she explained to me, step means, sometimes you step up, sometimes you step in, sometimes you step out, sometimes you just step aside. Because she said that Trey and I will raise Clara. And if Clara's not doing what she's supposed to be doing, she said, come get me. Let me discipline Clara. I don't want you disciplining Clara. And she said, I mean, if Clara's doing something in her life, is in danger, she's about to hurt herself, yeah, step in and do something. But she said, but come get me. She said, I'll even be the bad guy. You can be the good guy all the time, the fun Damon. And that was the strategy. So, I mean, first of all, I want to say before I answer that question that I had a great teacher in Kendall that wanted to be fair and equitable with Clara's father on how my role would be in Clara's life. So Clara and I became good. We became best friends. We're buds. I mean, she calls me Damon. She didn't have to call me, stepdad or anything like that. She just called me Damon, so I'm Damon. She's Clara. But I make it a priority, guys, to be a part of her life. And when she's around, I make it a priority to do stuff with her. Now, I'm on the road a lot in my life. I'm probably on the road 20 to 24 days out of the month. But when I'm home, I try to make it a point to do stuff with Clara. And I know the kind of stuff she likes to do. She likes to bake. She likes to dance. She likes to watch her show. She likes to play out in the yard. Gymnastics and dance, too. Those are big things. And I always put on my calendar every year, Kendall will give me the calendar. She's into dance. Clara's into dance. She has dance competition stuff, recitals, different plays that she puts on. So I have Kendall give me those dates, and those dates go on my calendars. Guys, those dates can't be taken by any group, team, organization, or company. And I mean, look, and there's people that have offered really nice paydays to be out there on the road speaking during those days, but that's it, man. Those are Clara's days. And I want her to always remember that when she looked up in the audience, in the stands, and the bleachers, that Damon was there. And that's a big part of my life, because I think that, when I was laying in my bunk in prison, and I thought to myself, man, I'll never have that kind of life. Whenever I go into prisons, whenever I go into a prison, whether it's a men's prison or a women's prison, at the end of my presentation, y'all have heard a taste of it, man. All these incredible things happen in my life. There's always a man or woman that'll come up to me that's an inmate. They'll come up afterwards like, Damon, man, you've got the most amazing life and the most amazing story. But of all the things in your life that you talked about, I want to know how you did that. They point at my wedding ring. They're like, how did you find someone that would love you? How did you find a family that would love you and take you in? And because I tell them about my family, not just my wife and my stepdaughter, but about my wife's family that loves me so much. And guys, listen, man, I know what it's like to be there. I know what they're talking about, man. You lay in your bunk in prison and you think to yourself, man, I'll never have that kind of life. Not now, because of the choices that I've made, the poor decisions I've made in life. Someone to take me in is going to have to take in so much baggage. And even if they love me, their family's not going to love me. I'm never going to be fully accepted. God answered all those prayers, y'all. Man, I tell people all the time that man plans and God laughs. So I look at this family that I have now with Kendall and Clara. That's the most sacred thing, because that's the thing I thought about the most when I laid in that bunk in prison, and thought to God, man, if I could have just that. And God answered. So he's given me that, and that's something for me to take care of. I've got to nurture that and take care of that. They are my priority in life.
Yeah. Well, you said she's 10. So Kyle has a 2-year-old daughter. I have a 5-year-old daughter. So what are we in store for as those daughters get older?
Slime. Lots of slime. Kids love slime, man. This is like, and I grew up watching Double Dare, and y'all probably watch Nickelodeon and stuff like that. Slime.
Oh, yeah.
But it wasn't readily accessible. You couldn't just go to Walmart and pick up a gallon of slime, but you can now. You can pick up glue and make your own slime. Clara loves slime. And matter of fact, guys, listen, man, what you're in store for, you've got to go check out this resort in Mexico, in Riviera Maya, Mexico, right outside of Cancun. It's Nickelodeon. They've got a Nickelodeon resort, man. And all the Nickelodeon characters come out, man. Depending on what age the kids are, man. If your kids are into Paw Patrol, the Paw Patrol characters are all out there. Dora the Explorer, what was the little monkey's name? Dora's little monkey. I can't remember the monkey's name. But they're all out there, man. SpongeBob, Patrick, they're all out there. And they had this big water park. And they've got a water park for babies. They got a water park for little kids. They got a water park for bigger kids. And at 1:30 every day, the entire park gets slimed. They slime everybody, man. That's what you're in store for, Kyle. That's what you're in store for, Mike. I mean, you take your kids to a Nickelodeon resort, you knock out a lot of dreams come true, man. But yeah, look, I mean, Clara loves making slime. She loves to dance. She likes to play sports. She hasn't gotten involved in any sports where she's actually playing on a team. But these teams that I talk to, if I talk to a women's athletic department, I always have them send me a volleyball or a basketball or a softball, something, and I introduce Clara to it because I want her to pick these different balls up and see what she likes. And, she likes playing with them, but she's never got serious at playing organized sports. But look, man, tea parties, I taught her how to ride a bike. You have these tea parties with them when they're younger. You put Big Red inside the tea, and that's what you're drinking, the tea party. They're going to dress you up and put makeup on you and do your hair and put mud mask on you and paint your fingernails. I've had my fingernails painted so many times.
Oh, yeah. All the fun stuff.
Yeah. Has that started for you yet, Mike, or are you getting your fingernails painted?
So Emma, our daughter who's 5, I mean, it's like girly girl times a million. Loves nails done. She goes with her grandmother every so often and gets her nails and her toenails done. Loves to wear makeup, everything. Anytime I mention like, you're not gonna make Dad do that, right? And she's like, no, Daddy, you don't have to do that. So I feel like I'm gonna escape the Dad, let's paint your fingernails too.
Wow.
So I feel a little lucky in that regard.
So we got a little, it's literally sitting beside me. I almost picked it up and showed it off, but a little makeup fake makeup thing, and it's got a little lipstick and a little brush thing that you put powder on. And so Hannah picks it up. She hits herself with it. Daddy, your turn, and I gotta take the powder and the fake lipstick and all that.
Yes.
Well, I know this is just a podcast, Kyle, but a lot of people have seen your face, so a little makeup might actually be okay for you there. So.
Yeah, anything would help this. I don't know it could get much worse.
No, you're good, man. But that's great, man. Whichever way you got to go, whether or not you're getting the makeup or not, you make yourself available to it, man. You're ready to go. You're ready to come in.
Absolutely. So me and Mike, we talk a lot about servant leadership when it's just me and him talking. And can you just talk about how important servant leadership is inside your own home?
Yeah, I tell people all the time when I'm out speaking that servant leadership is the secret to life. And the way I define servant leadership is helping other people reach their goals in life, helping to raise other people up to a different station of life. Because I truly believe that when we're helping other people, that's when we're at our best, and that's how we grow too. And we have help along the way. People have helped us along the way. None of us got where we are on our own. People helped us. So it's very important to be a servant leader. And we, in our home, we're very servant leader minded, service minded, I would say. We do a lot of volunteer work, and we get involved with a lot of different causes that we take Clara with us and show her what it's like to do this kind of work. My wife and I have a real estate development company with her parents where we buy old houses and refurbish them or buy land and build new houses on it. It's a development company. And one of the things I do is that, look, I'm in a position now that I hire people, and I want to hire people that are looking for a second chance in life. I'm looking for guys that are coming out of prison. They're not violent criminals. They're guys that can be around, they can be around families and stuff like that. But I want to bring them into work. And guys that are working at program recovery that are looking for a second chance. They could have just gotten out of prison last month, but I want to find these guys that are hungry and willing to put in the work. And I want to give them a chance at a new life and with an employer that is just like them, because there's really not a lot of difference with a guy like that and me. I mean, I may be wearing a different clothes than they are, living in a different kind of house, but I'm just like they are. I mean, I'm a person that's made mistakes and been helped, and I want to help those people. So one of the things we do is, it's very often we find a guy that has nothing. He's living in a halfway house, and this is going to be his first job. Maybe he's been out of prison for 3 weeks. And so Kendall and Claire and I will go to the store. We'll go to Walmart or somewhere, and we'll get him his first pair of work boots, get him some work clothes and stuff like that. Then we come home. And one of the things we've taught Clara when buying it is that we're not going to buy something that we wouldn't buy for ourselves.
Sure.
When we're doing charity work, we want to make sure that we get for them what we would get for ourselves. And we go home and with care, we package it all up and make it look nice. And Claire is part of the effort to help bundle everything up and put it into a suitcase for them. And she learns this stuff. And I think that it's really good for her, because I think she's getting a chance to see some things and be a part of something like that not a lot of kids her age will ever get to see. And she sees that in my life that servant leadership means that when I'm helping other people, that takes me out of my problems too. And so whenever she'll come up and she's got something that's weighing on her mind, and we'll talk about, hey, let's see if this is really something as bad as we think it is. And why don't we go out and go do some volunteer work? Why don't we go to a senior citizen center? Why don't we go do something to make someone else feel good? And that takes us out of our problems too. So that's one of the things I've been able to teach Claire about and kind of incorporate, that when we go out and we help other people, it really pulls us out of our problems and puts us in someone else's life. But servant leadership is something, look, man, I think this is a principle that everybody needs to teach their kids at a young age. And frankly, a lot of adults need to learn.
Yeah, without a doubt, it's something that we try to really instill in our children as well. I mean, I've worked for in the nonprofit sector my whole professional career, and still do, and trying to really instill that in our children from an early age of let's go along with dad and some of the things he does for work, and let's try to impact people, or let's go and pick up some things for Christmas gifts for other kids and things like that.
Absolutely.
And I was really interested to see and really excited about your Be a Coffee Bean Foundation. Again, somebody who works every day in the nonprofit world and sees the impact that nonprofits have on so many people. So just kind of quickly tell us a little bit about the work that you guys do with that foundation and maybe how that got started.
Yeah, and to talk about real quick, you had mentioned something that with Clara, what we do is Clara's fortunate. She's a very fortunate child. She lives in 2 homes where there's a lot of love, and she has a lot of toys. She gets a lot. He has a lot of stuff. She has way more than one kid needs. So about every 4 months, we go through all of Clara's toys and make her pick toys out that she's going to donate to other kids that don't have as much. And she's so good about doing that, man. It makes me tear up. It makes me so proud that she's such a good kid like that. She picks out some of the best toys because the same mindset. I want these kids to have the best. The foundation, the Be a Coffee Bean Foundation. The summer of 2020, I was having a conversation. I was in Clemson with Dabo and his wife. My wife and I were in Clemson with Dabo and his wife. We're having dinner. And Dabo was telling me about a group that he raises money for with his foundation called Call Me Mister. And Call Me Mister goes into high schools in South Carolina, and they find young black men graduating high school, and they give them a scholarship in elementary education because they're trying to address the numbers of black teachers in America, because less than 2% of the teachers in America are black men. And when Dabo told me that, I was like, wow, I can't believe that, man, less than 2%. But when Dabo told me about that, I was like, I got to meet these Call Me Mister guys. I've got a plan. And so I went and talked to the Call Me Mister guys at Clemson. I said, here's the deal. I know a place where there's a lot of black men that can be used right now. There's prison, because there's almost half the prison population is black men. I said, if I could find a state prison system somewhere in America that will allow me to go in there and find black men that are incarcerated and spend the last 4 years of prison, getting them an elementary education degree, and then when they get out, we'll provide them with the tools they need, a car, a wardrobe to teach in, a place to live for the first year, their first year student teacher salary. I said, my foundation will pay for all that, their education and all their tools they need when they get out. Will you help us mentor these guys for 4 years while they're in prison getting their degree? These guys at Clemson are like, man, you're the craziest white boy we've ever seen, man, but we're in. If you can find a state prison system that will allow that, man, we're in. And so I did, guys. I did. You talk about the dog that caught the car. I went to the state of Louisiana because I go to these prison systems all over America, and I pitched it to the director of prisons there, a guy named Jimmy LeBlanc, the Secretary of Corrections, and he said, I love it. We're in. And he said, no one in America has ever done this? And I said, no one, Jimmy. No one's even attempted to turn incarcerated black men into elementary school teachers and put them in the toughest elementary schools in that state when they get out of prison. Jimmy's like, we're going to do it. We're going to be the first. So right now we're picking our guys. We've got 2 of our 5 guys picked, Zatorio Cole and Robert Wilson. We call them Mr. Coffee Beans, combining Call Me Mister and Be a Coffee Bean, because these guys are going to be coffee beans in the pot of boiling water that's public education. So these guys are about to start working on their degrees. I think in March or May, they start with McNeese State University. That's the partner university. We're going to pay for their education for 4 years to get their education degrees, a bachelor degree. And when they get out, we're going to put them in the toughest elementary schools in the state of Louisiana, the hardest, most underprivileged, at-risk, majority black elementary schools, so a place where a lot of the future prison population is going to come from. Because I truly believe these men, with their life experience and their currency to spend with that population, they can change some lives inside that place. I mean, think about it, guys. What better person to pull any kid aside to inner city elementary school and say, hey, son, let me tell you about the choices you're making in your life. Let me tell you my story. And if a kid gets in trouble, don't send him to the principal. Send him to Mr. Coffee Bean. Send him into a world. These men, when we're selecting these guys, these 2 guys that we picked already, guys, I mean, their applications were, and first of all, the vetting process is very, very hard to get to the spot where they get a scholarship. But we're vetting them, and when I get to meet them, I'm like, hey, listen, did you ever have a black male teacher growing up? And the first 2 guys, the answer was no. And I asked these guys, if you had a black male teacher growing up, do you think your life would have turned out different? And I mean, both of these guys just lit up. They were like, yeah, Damon, because I never had a black male figure to look up to. My only black male figures to look up to were in the streets. And that's where I went for that acceptance and that love. And I could be that for these kids. And so that's one of the initiatives that the Be a Coffee Bean Foundation does. We've partnered with AIG. AIG paid for the first 5 guys to get their education. The other thing we do that's very kid-centric that'll be a big hit on this program is we do a thing called Coffee Bean Cares. And CARES is an acronym, is cultivating activities and relationships through extracurricular scholarships. So one of the toughest things that I had to see when I was in prison were these men that I was locked up with who had children on the outside. These guys would be crying when they get off the phone. They're crying after they get a letter from home. And I'm like, man, what's wrong? And they're like, Damon, my son or my daughter wants to do, my daughter wants to take dance, or my son wants to take karate or play some like baseball. We can't afford that. I'm in prison. My family's falling apart. And guys, just seeing that powerlessness in those dads' faces, man, it made me think, if I ever get in a position to help kids like that, I will. And we've got it, man. This program called Coffee Bean Cares, what we're doing, and we're starting in the state of Texas right now, is we look for children that have incarcerated parents. Because studies show that if a kid that has an incarcerated parent is almost 50% more likely to go to prison themselves one day, right? This generational incarceration thing that happens, it becomes an epidemic in a lot of these communities. And not only is a kid more likely to go to prison if they have a parent that's incarcerated, but there's a breakdown of the parent-child relationship that goes on when a parent is off in prison. And it's not the kid's fault. The parent made the bad choices to go to prison. So what we do is we find children. We're starting our area. We have 5 kids we're looking at right now. And hopefully all 5 of their guardians are going to be on board. Find kids that have incarcerated parents. And if we have a connection to the parent on the inside, we tell the parent that's in prison, hey, nominate your kid on the outside. We already know about your kid on the outside. Send us a letter nominating them, that we can show the kid that you nominated them for this scholarship. And whatever extracurricular activity they want to do, we pay for 100% of it. I mean, like dance. This is another thing. Kyle, you got this to look forward to. Mike was talking about, do I have anything to look forward to? Dance. These girls get into dance. Dance is expensive, y'all. Dance is
expensive.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Costumes, recitals, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
You know what? If you're a little girl and you have a parent that's incarcerated, a man or woman that's in prison here in Texas, we'll pay for that. We'll take care of all your costumes. We'll do all this stuff. We'll even take care of ride shares where we can. The only caveat that we have is we have to talk to the guardian or the parent on the outside that takes care of the kid and say, hey, look, if we dropped dance, soccer, karate, baseball, if we dropped one of these extracurricular activities in your lap, would it implode your life? Meaning, like, if you're working 3 jobs, is it practical for your kid to do an extracurricular scholarship? But what we would love to do, guys, is we would love to have a kid brought to us at about 9 years old. The parent's going to be off for a while in prison. And we'd like to get that kid started with an extracurricular activity they love at 9 years old and take them all the way through when they're 18. Mm-hmm. We want to keep that kid connected to something out there that other kids get to do that they may not otherwise get to do because their parent made a poor choice in life. We don't want the kids to have to pay for it. That's our foundation.
Yeah, man, that's awesome.
That is, goosebumps again. Yeah. And
awesome.
as a high school teacher, you talking about trying to get black men into the profession. It's needed. It's absolutely needed. I can't tell you. So I used to coach with a guy named Kevin Dyson. You may know of him. He was a first-round pick for the Titans out of Utah, and Music City Miracle Man. He scored the touchdown against the Bills in the playoffs in the wild card game. It was the guy that came up a yard short in the Super Bowl, and that was a conversation me and him had, was because he grew up with a single mom, and him and his brother both ended up in the NFL, and they had all this talent that got them there. That's God given, but just the ability to he talked about not having a black male role model in his life, and he talked about how much better his life would be if it had just been there, which is why he got done playing football in the NFL and had enough money to go ahead and retire and play golf the rest of his life, but instead went out and got a doctorate in education, is now a principal at a high school because has the highest percentage of black students in the district that me and him work in. And he was like, that's how I give back. So just hearing it firsthand and then seeing what you're doing, man, it is fantastic.
Man, I would love to meet him and talk to him about our program. One of the reasons why is, first of all, I think he'd be interested in it because we're addressing a need that he grew up in the kind of environment we're going to put these guys in.
Yeah.
But second of all is I want to find positive black male role models around America for these guys to hear from in their mentoring phase of the next 4 years. I want them to hear from guys like that. I want them to hear from positive white male role models too. I want them to hear, because I've got this access to all these different people. I want them to hear that there's a village out there waiting for them, that so many people are rooting for these guys because they believe that they're part of the solution and not part of the problem. So I'd love to exchange my information and get to know him.
Absolutely. I can try to connect y'all. I think that's something he'd love to be involved in. So This is Dad's Watching Sports, and we haven't done a ton of sports, but I have to ask, how'd you get involved with presenting to, these college football teams with, how did Nick Saban get your number or Dabo Swinney get your number? Like, how does that play out?
Man, this is a wild story. And it would just pass the 5-year anniversary of it, Kyle. January 12th, 2017, man. I'd been out of prison for 14 months. I got this story. Obviously, there's more to it. But I want to share it with college football programs. I played college football back in the 90s, but I don't know any of these coaches, man. I haven't played ball in 21 years, man. Since I took a snap, no one knows me. I don't know them. So a buddy of mine in Houston, which is 90 miles from where I live in Beaumont, invited me to the Bear Bryant Coach of the Year Award that night. It was held in Houston. 8 best coaches in America were going to be there. He sneaks me in. He's part of the Houston media, KHOU, sneaks me in. And man, I get to meet all these coaches at night, Kyle. I mean, USC, Wisconsin, Penn State, PJ Fleck, they're all there. And I get to shake hands with all these coaches and meet them. And every one of these coaches that I meet slams the door in my face at night, Kyle. I mean, they're telling me no, left and right. My pitch is terrible, but I'm even more, I'm difficult in person. One of the coaches runs the other direction when I told him I just got out of prison, man. He can't get away from me fast enough. And so I'm there, and 7 to 8 coaches have told me no in 1 hour. It's a no every 8 minutes, man. I'm thinking about leaving. I'm in the corner of the Toyota Center and thinking about just walking out and going home because I can't get the last coach is the most in-demand coach. His team had just beat Alabama 2 nights before for the national championship. I can't even get near the guy. But I'm like, you know what, Damon? No, you're not leaving. You survived prison. You survived way worse than this. And you want to be a motivational speaker. What kind of motivational speaker would just quit, right? Who wants to listen to that guy? But man, I stalked Dabo Swinney around that room that night. And I must look like a crazy person, Kyle. I'm hiding behind fake plants. I eavesdrop on every conversation this guy has. And I finally pounce on Dabo. And man, I've got Dabo up against the wall. He can't go anywhere. And I give him a pitch for about a minute. Why are you going to bring me in? And I'm pretty high energy. You can already see. And I take a breath. And Dabo's like, dude, you got a card on you or something, man? So I gave him a card. He snatched my card. He took off running the other direction. And over his shoulder, he says, we'll be in touch. And I'm like, man, another no. But you know what, guys? I felt okay about that last no because I left it all on the field. And that's what we tell these kids growing up, man. We coach them in sports and we tell them, man, you leave it all on the field. You give it your best effort. And sometimes you're going to come up short, but that's okay as long as you gave it all you got. And look, I did. And one of the things Mr. Jackson told me in prison, he said, you don't have to win all your fights, but you do have to fight all your fights. And it was a huge lesson in life for me. And that night, I fought all my fights and I lost, but I went home and slept like a baby. 4 months later, I mean, I'd forgotten about this night. 4 months later, I got an email from the director of football operations at the University of Clemson, a guy named Mike Dooley. And he says, hey, Damon, Coach Swinney met you at an award show in Dallas. Met you at an award show in Houston. He'd love to have you come talk to the team. Do you have August 1st open? Dude, Kyle, I got every first open, man. I got nothing going on in my life, man. So August 1st, 2017, I go speak to the Clemson Tigers, the defending national champions of college football. And when I got done with my presentation that night, Dabo Swinney's got me up against the wall in the team room, and Dabo was in my face, man. Dabo's like, dude, that's the most amazing story I've ever heard. I've never seen my players respond like that to a speaker. He said, man, have you been to Alabama yet? I'm like, no, Dabo. I've been to Clemson, dude. I hadn't been anywhere. He said, man, we'll see about it. He said, I just texted Nick Saban from the back of the room, told him what I was watching. Now, think about that for a second, guys. This guy heard something that he thought was so amazing for his team, and his gut reaction is to text his biggest rival and tell him, man, you got to get this in your team too. That's the kind of guy Dabo is. That tells you everything you need to know about Dabo Swinney.
Yep.
So when I landed in Houston the next morning for my trip to Clemson, I had a voicemail and a text message from the director of football operations at the University of Alabama and said, hey, we'll see you in Tuscaloosa in 3 weeks. You're on. Just like that, Dabo Swinney kicked open the door to college football. And, man, every coach started calling. Kirby Smart, Lincoln Riley, Chip Kelly, Lane Kiffin. Hey, when are you going to come talk to my team? I heard you got to come talk to my team. Here's my number. Call me when you're ready, you know. So Dabo Swinney kicked open the door to college football for me. Really, Kyle, the real magic happened in August of 2018. 1 year later, I was at my desk at work at this law firm I used to work at in Beaumont. I got a phone call. And on the other end of my phone is John Gordon. John Gordon, man, the energy bus guy. Man, the guy that I go to every morning for my inspiration on Twitter. He's on my phone. And I'm like, John, how do you know who I am, man? How do you know who Damon West is? He said, Dabo Swinney. He said, man, I was just in Dabo's office, and he kept on telling me about this coffee bean story. He said, Damon, the team motto at Clemson is be a coffee bean. He said they got shirts that say be a coffee bean with a little paw print on it. He said, Damon, and John said this back in 2018, y'all. John said, Damon, the world needs the coffee bean message. He said, write a book with me. He said, well, let's deliver this to the world, Damon. He said, write a book with me. We'll call it The Coffee Bean. It'll be a bestseller. And so we did. The Coffee Bean came out in July of 2019. It has been a bestseller every month since. I mean, it is in every language in the world now. It's in Chinese, Spanish, Arabic, French, Italian. I was in Mexico with my family last month at the Nickelodeon Resort and did a book signing with the Spanish version of my book in another country, y'all. I mean, but it all goes back to that meeting that night, Kyle, whenever I went to that awards show 5 years ago, and I was getting my face kicked in, getting beat by everybody there rejecting me, but I refused to leave. I refused to walk out that door without getting that last no. That no that I was sure I was going to get ended up being the biggest yes of my life. And I tell people all the time, don't ever not ask the question, man. Always be in the room to ask. You have to be in the room for the magic to happen. And all of us, man, and we're always one Dabo Swinney moment away from someone that just changes our lives because they believe in us.
And Damon, we could ask you questions and sit here and listen to you all night, and it would be absolutely amazing. But you've given us an hour of your time, and we just can't thank you enough. So it's DamonWest.org is his website. You can find him on Twitter, DamonWest7 on Twitter. Damon, we can't thank you enough for coming on the show and just sharing your story and your inspiration and everything. It was just fantastic to hear, and we just can't thank you enough.
Yeah, guys, thanks for spending your time. You're investing your time in me, man. That's the most valuable resource you have. And on a Saturday night, you spend an hour with me, man. I don't take that lightly. I really appreciate y'all's investment in me.
Absolutely. So the new book is The Locker Room. It'll be out, you said May or June?
Yeah, end of May, beginning of June, man. The Locker Room by Damon West and Stephen Mackey. Guys, this is one of those books, telling you, racism, the cancel culture. We take both of those issues and talk about how if you have humility and grace, you can deal with any tough topic.
Absolutely. We absolutely look forward to it. Damon, thanks again for joining us on Dad's Watching Sports.
Guys, thanks a lot, man. Have a good night. Be a coffee bean.
Absolutely. Be a coffee bean indeed. Well, Kyle, I know we got to get out of here for this episode, but that was fantastic. Any last words, or should we even try to add to that?
You want me to follow that? That was unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable.
That it was. Well, thank you so much for checking us out this week on Dad's Watching Sports. We'll be back soon with another episode. Again, Damon West. You can find him at DamonWest.org or at DamonWest7 on Twitter. Go check out the books. Go listen to the podcast and go check out all the stuff that he does that you can find online across the interweb. So this has been Dad's Watching Sports. I'm Michael Draper. He's Kyle Castles. We will see you again soon.